I got married last year, but I'm still technically obsessed with weddings. So now what?
Come sta andando?
I'm wedding dress shopping. The only thing that I can think of doing aside from checking myself into some sort of institution is to make content out of my experience. I feel like the wedding took up such a large chunk of my life for such a significant portion of time that it's weird to me to just not talk about it, especially now that I finally have the mental capacity and also the time to really just reflect on everything that happened, talk about the things that I'm so happy that I did and I think you guys should do too, the things that I regret and think you should definitely not do. The added perspective that I have now that also time has gone on and it's not such an emotionally charged event. I want to make a space for, of course, the up and coming future brides that have no idea what they're about to get themselves into, but also a space for past brides to just share their perspective and their experiences to help the community. For those of us who can't just switch off this switch that says, okay, for X amount of years, your wedding is going to take up every free thought, euro or dollar moment of time that you have to now it not. This is going to be a little series for you, even because we're coming up on our 1-year wedding anniversary. And so I was feeling, I guess, a bit more nostalgic with regards to if I'm going to do this thing that I want to do. So, just chronicle everything that happened with my wedding. It makes sense that it would be now. So with all that being said, if you could be interested in how I survived my Jamaican, Nigerian, American, Italian wedding in Jamaica, here is the series for you. I want to talk about wedding budgets, budgeting for your wedding, and surviving the wedding industrial complex. 3 interesting statistics that I just want you to keep in your head while watching. Roughly 30% of engaged couples take on debt to fund their weddings. I'm assuming that this stat is coming from the US though. And among these couples, 60% of that debt is taken out via credit card, and 40% of that debt are actual personal loans. 57% of couples receive financial help from family, often parents. And then finally, in 2024, the typical wedding in the US was around $33,000. Now, of course, this number varies. You can have locations where it costs less, locations where it costs more, but I actually think this is a pretty decent number globally because in my experience, hearing what my friends are spending in Italy, hearing what my friends are spending in Nigeria, seeing what I just spent in Jamaica, this $30,000 for the year 2023-2024 actually sounds about right with regards of more or less how much everybody has spent is spending. I feel like I didn't articulate this well enough, so let me try again. The reason why I bring up these stats is because comparison is the thief of joy, and a lot of people are motivated when they're planning their wedding and setting their budgets by what they see around them, comparing themselves to other people. But oftentimes they're comparing themselves without knowing the numbers behind what they're seeing, and the numbers are that quite a lot of people that you're seeing are taking on debt to fund the weddings that you're seeing. Quite a lot of people that you're seeing are having their families pay for or at least help pay for their wedding. Now, in the case of the people that are taking on debt, do you want that to be you? If you knew that they took on debt to fund that wedding that you're looking at, would you still be thinking about it in the same way? Also, how do you compete with somebody that has parents or a family that can, help fund their wedding when you don't? That's right, you can't compete, and there is no competition. At the end of the day, you should be looking inside of yourself, remembering your goals, what you want in life, where you want to be, and as I will say later in this video, cutting your coat according to your size, adjusting your expectations so that you can have your dream wedding in a way that is reasonable. When we decided to get married, we said that we were going to spend $15,000, partially because of when we got married, partially because of the information that was available to us. We just didn't go into it with a reasonable number. I wish that we had known that that was what we had to have in mind, because we kind of discovered it once we had already started planning. And by then, it was already in my head that, we were going to have this wedding, I was going to have it this way. And so there was really no going back. Now it was okay, well, let's play catch up to be able to pay for this. And that, of course, would inevitably cause stress. I did all this research. I had my Pinterest boards. I found the wedding planner and I wrote to the wedding planner. I was like, well, I want to spend $15,000 and have 120 people at my wedding. And she was like, yeah, that's not happening. She said, yeah, at that budget, you can comfortably accommodate this many people. And if you want this many people, you would have to raise your budget to this. And after like cross-checking with my mom's friends who their kids recently had gotten married and, Google and all, we saw that she wasn't lying. Our final number in terms of budget and what we spent, which I'm sure we had budgeted 25 and we ended up spending 30 with regards to the wedding. And then with regards to like everything else, it was another 10. So we spent $40,000, which included our wedding and essentially our honeymoon/vacation, because this also included the round trip flights from Italy to Jamaica, the 7 days in the all-inclusive luxury resort, the activities that we did with our guests, the transportation, as I said, because we subsidized transportation for all of our guests. Once I put all of those things together, we spent $40,000, even though we had thought we were going to spend 25. In terms of budget, it's not even just weddings. I've seen this happen with multiple big projects now. For me to now say it's a law, this is how it is, double it. If your budget is 15, in your head just have that you're going to spend 30. Tell your vendors that you're going to spend 15. Do everything possible to stay as close to 15 as possible, but know that it's probably going to be closer to 30, and that's how you survive it. In terms of things that I really wanted to prioritize with our budget, it's because of my line of work, probably. It's because of my generation. It's because of this and that. But I really wanted to prioritize aesthetic. So, of course, decor, photo, video. Those were my 3 most important vendors. And then as we got closer to the wedding, as I started thinking and coming to my senses, then I started to also prioritize guest experience. And so that's how we ended up opting for the open bar rather than the wine and beer bar. That's how we opted to cover our guests' transportation and, a part of their costs, given that they were traveling. One thing that I did not expect to spend as much as I did on was definitely the stationery, because it was something that in the beginning I was like, well, we don't need to send out paper invites. We didn't send out paper save the dates. Towards the end, I'm like, well, my parents want a physical invite. Their friends want a physical invite. Older people want physical invite. And honestly, even me, I want a physical invite. And so before you know it, you're sending physical invites. We didn't send out physical invites to everybody, but we sent out like 30. It's like, well, we spent all this money on the table settings and the decor. What, you're not going to have a nice menu? You're not going to have a nice program? And so before you know it, I think we spent I have to double check, but I want to say 200 euros. On stationery, which I wasn't expecting to spend. I think that the average cost of weddings is neither excessive nor reasonable. It's just our perception that has actually changed. What we are seeing as a normal wedding, or what is being marketed to us as a normal wedding on social media, is actually not. That would have been considered a very luxury experience that was specific to the richest people of society. What we're seeing now as a normal wedding. Normal weddings from before did not happen in other countries. They did not have all of the flowers and the light design and the special effects and the multi-person camera teams doing photo and video. What we have now are actual productions. What we perceived as normal weddings became productions, or productions became what we perceive as normal weddings, and the price, it reflects that. One thing that I was really adamant about was that we were going to pay for this wedding ourselves. Remember, we had gotten married civilly at the city hall, and that kind of served as, specifically for Enrico's side of the family, their wedding. I didn't say anything to anybody. Whatever people told us to do, we did. They were like, oh, buy rings. Oh, let's do the lunch. Oh, do this, do that. And I went and I gracefully participated in that. But I always knew that that wasn't my wedding, not in my head. Even if realistically speaking, that was the wedding, that was the legal wedding, that was the only wedding that actually counts for anything. But for me, sentimentally, the wedding that I had always dreamed of as a child and that I wanted, I knew what that looked like. And I knew that if I asked anybody for help financially, they would then put their opinions in, and it wouldn't come out the way I wanted. I wanted control. over my wedding. And so for that reason, we didn't ask for any sort of family help and we funded our whole wedding ourselves. Now, if you're fortunate enough to have family that will help bankroll your wedding and also be nice enough to not terrorize you, you are so lucky. I'm so happy for you. Do you? I'm glad that that is your situation. Feel like if you're the kind of person like me, don't think that that check is coming no strings attached. It's always attached. Somebody's always going to feel rightfully entitled to have a say in how their money is being spent. So if you don't want useless fights with your families, just fund your wedding yourself, in my opinion. We started out with the idea that we were going to have bridesmaids and groomsmen, a big wedding party, but then in the end, we didn't. And that actually ended up like saving us a significant amount because I wanted to offer those things to people. And just cutting out hair and makeup, I saved myself like almost $2,000. Definitely don't think that a wedding party is necessary, and I can elaborate on that more in a longer video. And cutting that part out is, I think, a pretty good way for everybody, even your wedding party, to save. I can't say what are all the smart ways to cut costs for your wedding, but I can tell you some things that I did. For example, my wedding dress was secondhand. That allowed me to save quite a bit. I DIY'd pretty much all of our party, like our favors. I DIY'd a lot of like the extra minute details, like the cake cutter and our champagne glasses. Ordered those on Amazon and made the little designs of them myself. I mean, this one is a funny story, but just trying to repurpose different aspects of the wedding. So for example, our arch, we used our arch both for the ceremony and for the reception. And I mean, that's kind of a negative and positive thing. This arch was the bane of my existence. This was my expectation of the arch. This was my mood board. And then this was what I got the day of my wedding. Definitely not the same. One direction that I had told them was that I wanted to use the arch during the ceremony, and then rather than have another arch for the reception, we would just move the arch. Now, what I didn't calculate was the fact that we were having our reception under a tent, and the height of the tent had to obviously be taken into account for this arch. So the arch looked great and as it was supposed to underneath the tent for the reception, but for the actual ceremony, it looked quite short and a little bit funny. So that was a thing that on the day of the wedding, I just looked at it and I was like, why does it look like that? And I mean, it doesn't look terrible. It just doesn't look like the mood board. That was one way that we saved money, repurposing things from around the wedding. One thing that I would definitely recommend and that we did was to have a separate account for your wedding expenses. Once we started wedding planning, we had already had that $15,000, $20,000 in savings ready to spend. As we saved up the balance that we would need, we would just periodically add it to the wedding account. A cool thing was that we had most of this money on a high yield savings account. So we did earn, a couple $100s in interest over the course of 2 years of planning the wedding. It's out of sight, out of mind. You don't have to worry about accidentally spending it or using it for something else. And once it's time to write the check, it's just coming from there. You're not seeing at least your checking account just go from 100 to 0 as well, if it's already like separated out. That's one thing that I would definitely suggest to do that we did that, took off a little bit of that financial strain. If I could tie this all together somehow and just come off with what was the biggest lesson that I learned in terms of budgeting for our wedding, it's just arming yourself with as much information as possible. Do your research. Actually know, ask around how much a wedding costs. If you know you're a budgeter, if you know you don't have money like that, do it like a year before you start planning. Get the feelers out. Ask your friends that are getting married, how much are you guys spending, to get a realistic idea of how much money that you actually need. Then once you have a benchmark of how much money everybody is spending, you can start to analyze what is more important to you, what is not important to you, and I don't even want to talk about how you're going to fund it, because me personally, I think you should just pay pay for your wedding yourself. There's this Nigerian saying, cut your coat according to your size. Pay for what you can afford. If you can't afford the 120 person luxury destination wedding, you shouldn't have that. Like, I couldn't afford the 120 person wedding, so I had a 60 person wedding. I couldn't afford the like brand new custom wedding dress, so I got a secondhand one. Like, know yourself, know your budget, and make your choices accordingly, because I can tell you from the other side, you will never regret not having gone bankrupt or not having like taken on debt for your wedding. There's going to be so many things after you get married that you're gonna have to spend money on. So be smart about how you're budgeting for your wedding. Get a realistic number in your head, stick to that number, understand how much time it's going to take you to save up to have that number. And once you have that number, put it in a high yield savings account. And that's just how you're gonna pay for your wedding. Out of sight, out of mind. And I think, yeah, that is the way to avoid any sort of financial stress. And if you can avoid financial stress, I think that planning your wedding becomes like significantly better. It's still gonna probably suck, but it's gonna be significantly better than if you would also add on to the fact that you're putting on financial pressure on yourself. I think that's going to be it for this first episode on budgeting for your wedding, saving for your wedding. How much did I spend? How much will you guys spend? I hope that it was interesting to you, and I would love to hear your opinions. Let us know, when did you get married? If you're comfortable, how much did you spend on your wedding? What are some tips that you could maybe pass on to the future brides? First step is definitely getting your finances in order and understanding what you can afford, adjusting your expectations. That then sets you up to have a much happier experience with regards to your wedding, I feel. So yeah, thanks for hanging out with me. I have a few more episodes for you guys on the topic. As always, be sure to like and subscribe for more, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Mwah.